Today, let's do a quick dive into the man dubbed the Godfather of Freestyle, the guy that started Haro Bikes, Bicycle Hall of Famer, and was in ET. How did this young kid invent an entirely new sport that we call freestyle? Let's talk Bob Haro. First things first, guys, please just give me 30 seconds of your time. We put on an annual event called Robin's Ride for Hope. It's a charity bicycle ride that benefits these boxes given to people when they first come in and do their first day of chemo, predominantly with gynecological cancers. As many of you know that's followed this channel, one of my good friends, his mom passed away of ovarian cancer, and that's what started this ride. This year marks the 10th year of the ride, so it's super huge. So if you want to support the channel and you like this kind of content, I'll leave a link down below. Sign up, come out to the ride. I'll be there. Registration's only like 25 bucks. You get a bunch of swag, you get fed. There's live music. It goes in conjunction with the farmer's market. There's tons of crap to do there. It's gonna be awesome. If you can't make it and you just want to donate, that's down below as well. Just make sure you put in like MRB or something, just so we know, and I'll give you a shout out on the channel. But thank you guys so much for the support. Let's get on with the video. Bob Haro first came into this world in Pasadena, California in the year 1958. He was always an athletic youngster, but more than that, he was very creative. Bob, like so many, initially started racing motocross, but he quickly realized that to go faster, you need some money. Bob's family had a modest beginning, but they weren't super wealthy, and bicycles were a heck of a lot cheaper than motorcycles, so he swapped his motorcycle out for a bicycle. BMX, as you all know, in the 70s and 80s was increasing in popularity at mock turkey. Like, I keep trying to figure out what the next new sport is going to be to compare BMX and mountain bikes to, like in the 80s, but so far there really hasn't been something to grow as quick as these did insofar as I can tell. Bob started racing all over the place, doing quite well. Haro thought that one of the coolest parts of the BMX scene was the number plates, and he wanted a unique one for himself. At the time, most of them were just these like simple oval shapes with some numbers in them. Bob went down to his local hardware store, bought some supplies, and made his first product, a number plate. When he went to the track, people started asking him, "Where did you get that? It's freaking awesome." He created some flyers and essentially started doing grassroots marketing, getting people interested in his number plates. And to say that they took off like hotcakes is an understatement. He was selling thousands of them. He took this money and essentially reinvested it into the company and started making more accessories and selling them at races. His first business was born before he was even 20 years old, and he dubbed it Factory Plates. Bob has always had a knack for drawing, so it was only natural that at the same time he was selling plates, he started drawing BMX characters, kind of little comic strips. Seemingly, he is just as good at drawing, designing, art, as he is at BMX. Bob started talking to a guy named Bob Osborne. Yes, the father of R.L. Osborne. He was with BMX Action magazine, and Bob told Bob that he could draw for the magazine, and they would pay him $25 per drawing. Haro, who was like late teens at this time, was like, "Wow, okay, someone actually likes my artwork, my drawings, and they're willing to pay for it? Heck yeah, like this is cool." So at the time, not only was Bob making a name for himself by racing his bicycle, but he was also making a name for himself and getting recognition with his products and his artwork. Even though Haro describes himself as having good talent but no real direction, he did have multiple avenues he could have taken off into. One day, Bob was in the car with his two other brothers at the time. His dad was driving, and his father turns around and says to them, "Me and your mom are getting a divorce, and you gotta find somewhere to live." So, Bob, being over 18, had to find somewhere to go. Now, he doesn't really seem to have any animosity towards his father. He actually goes as far to say that his dad was a good person. He was just going through a lot of crap at the time. But I could only imagine, you just turned 18. And I remember being 18. I remember being 18, being a little lost. You've got all these avenues to go, but it's such a pivotal moment in your life, and that does not fall on deaf ears with Bob. He was at a pretty big fork in his road. He had to make a decision. College? Nah, he isn't really interested in college. Maybe BMX, maybe. He was working at a local grocery store at the time, so maybe he will just work his way up that ladder. Bob Osborne, who was paying him for his contributions to BMX Action at the time, said, "Hey, look, I like what you do. You have potential. Why don't you come live with my family for a bit until you get on your feet and you can work at BMX Action?" For all intents and purposes, Haro was an intern at the zine, designing page layouts, doing monthly comic strips, essentially scratching his creative itch at this time. And this is where Bob went full in on bicycle motocross. It went from something he loved doing to something he was eating, sleeping, and breathing. He worked for a BMX magazine, he raced, he toured, he was roommates with Bob Osborne's son, R.L. Osborne. So any free time Haro got, he was riding and racing with him. And in the late 70s, Bob was selling so much BMX stuff that it was time to change the name of his business. Factory plates kind of limited him, and thus the Haro brand was born. BMX was very new when Bob was coming up, but skateboarding had already blown up, and right near Bob's house was a skate park. I think we'll back up just a second, but I couldn't really place a definitive time. But this is kind of the birth of freestyle here. BMX was very new when Bob was coming up, but skateboarding had already blown up, and right near Bob's house was a skate park. Interestingly enough, bikes were not allowed at a park like that at the time, so after hours, Bob and his friends would sneak over to the track on a night that the moonlight was just good enough to see, hop the fence, and mimic what skateboarders were doing on their bikes. And that was kind of the first inklings of doing tricks like flatland, riding vert, ramps, anything like that. That's kind of the first iteration of that. Sure, there were people probably doing it across the country at the time. Bob was definitely one of the first, but as we have talked about in a previous video, Bob got to be a part of those infamous SE tours trying to promote BMX. You can watch two-part series on SE and Scott Breithout if you are so inclined. I'll leave a link to the first video here. But basically, they would follow a BMX race schedule, and they were, as Bob almost describes it, like a sideshow, kind of showing off what else you can do with a BMX bike. He, made a couple comments about they would fully build plywood ramps, which hits me at home because that's what we used to do as a kid, although our ramps were probably like 2 feet. They would build full-size quarter-pipe ramp or whatever, put it on the back of a truck. He said a couple of times it fell off going down the highway and plywood would be scattered everywhere. I'm sure that was awesome. But they were going around the country setting these things up and showing people what flatland is, what freestyle is, because this is long before the extreme sports or action sports nomenclature we're used to. Bob, being one of the forefathers of this style of riding, wrote a step-by-step book you could purchase that would teach you how to trick ride. Trick riding really didn't have a good ring to it, so instead, him and a friend of his called it Freestyle Moves. That is the book that started it all. It's called Freestyle Moves by Bob Haro. And thus the term freestyle was born. So let's take a step back and think about the bigger picture of this. There is no such thing as BMX, 20 years before Bob came around. And at the time, there's no such thing as freestyle BMX or trick riding. BMX racing is huge at this point. And the local kid in BFE, North Carolina, hears about a team coming through after a race to do a free show. When this wide-eyed little fella shows up to the event, he would see Bob Haro being essentially a sideshow act, flipping his BMX bike around doing freestyle. This was completely new and was blowing people's minds. So Haro, he even concedes that there is no way of knowing who did the first trick on a BMX bike. He might not have been the first person to ride a bike in a pool, but he was the first person to package freestyle and sell it. He's the one that made freestyle popular. And through all of my research, you can sit there and argue till you're blue in the face about firsts. But I will give Bob he is the father of freestyle, because whether or not he did the first trick is irrelevant to me. He made it popular. This next piece of the story really blew me away because I had no idea. Bob's secretary left him a note on his desk, and think about this, Bob is still in his early 20s. The note was from a movie company looking for bicycle riders. This is probably late 70s at this point. Keep in mind, On Any Sunday had come out, but that wasn't really a mainstream movie that everyone would see. BMX was still an unknown form of cycling at this time. Bob called the production company back and said, "What the heck, I'll drive out and see what's up." He gets there, and most of the kids that were riding were like 14, 15 years old. They were there with their parents, and Bob was almost 10 years their senior. The BMX kids went through a series of tests, basically proving that they could ride a bike like they said they could. The hiring agent came over and said, "All right, Bob, you're in. We pay $50 a day." Most of the other kids, like I said, were there with their parents and were just happy to be involved in a movie. Seems like fun. Bob told the guy, "Dude, I can't. It cost me more in gas to get here than $50. The agent responded with, "Well, how much do you want?" After a few seconds of thought, Bob blurted out, $350. All right, whatever, be here on this date for the start of filming. This film, not just in my opinion, but in a lot of people's opinions, pushed BMX into superstardom. This movie was none other than E.T., the extraterrestrial. Really think about that. Stranger Things came out and BMX saw a slight surge in popularity again, but everybody knows what a BMX bike is now. When E.T. came out, some people didn't even know that style of bicycle existed. 20 years before E.T. came out, it wasn't really a thing, so that movie went on to hold the top grossing film position for almost 15 freaking years, and it came out in 1981. And Bob Haro got to be in it. He was almost like a pivotal role in the BMX chase scene. Not only did Bob really bring to the forefront freestyle, but he was involved in one of the most influential movies that boosted BMX to this like godlike status for the span of at least 10 years. Everybody wanted a BMX bike, and a big portion of that is E.T. And I never really put two and two together with BMX bikes being an E.T. until you really think about how new that is. So at this time, everyone was so focused on BMX racing, Bob Haro was about to leave them in the dust with one of the first ever freestyle BMX bikes. Bob put it like this: BMX racing was huge and everyone was trying to come out with the next best race bike, so they just left little old Bob Haro alone to do his weird little trick thing. Bob ended up working with Torker, all the while still making accessories under his Haro brand. Torker was a small manufacturer and Bob wanted to make a bike specifically for freestyle, which really hasn't been done at that time. But he definitely wanted his last name on it. Thus, the first bicycle solely dedicated to trick riding was born, the Haro Freestyler. And soon, Torker were putting more Haro stickers on frames than they were their own. These frames started as a small batch production, but then they couldn't keep them in stock. They were selling like crack. So now, Haro sold a ton of accessories and a bike to boot. The BMX boom pushed his brand into the $6 million sales range in the mid-80s. In 1988, Bob sold the Haro brand to West Coast Cycles, who are a big cycling brand that wanted their fingers in the freestyle pie. Haro admits that he sold really because he had gotten the company to the size that he couldn't manage it anymore, and thought it was time to let someone else take it over that could blow it up even more. He had kind of reached his business potential, if that makes sense. West Coast Cycles had 130 sales reps, big warehouses, and huge distribution capabilities. In a single year, Haro's sales went from $7 million to $14 million. Bob stayed on with the company, but was able to take a step back and do what he really enjoyed: design. He got to design bicycles. He was staying with the company. Bob Haro actually retired from BMX racing and freestyling in the mid-80s. As he puts it, he didn't want to stay past his welcome. He didn't want to be that guy that kept getting hurt and should have retired years ago. The tipping point for Bob, though, was when Haro hired Mike Dominguez to ride for them. Bob was in his mid-20s and Mike didn't even have a driver's license yet. They were riding and Bob got warmed up, hit the ramp a few times, got comfortable, and then he really sent it. Bob got like 6 to 8 feet of air off the top of this ramp. So when you think about it like that, let's just say he got 6 feet. If it's a 6 feet ramp, he's 12 feet in the air, so that's gonna hurt if he hit the ground. Then all of a sudden, Mike came in, flying towards the ramp, not even warmed up, launched at 15 feet past the coping of the ramp, and Bob thought, So that's the next generation. Bob's a smart guy. Like I said, I think he's more self-aware than most people I've met in my life. He stated that after getting hurt a bunch, torn ACL, bum shoulder, he was starting to get scared of getting hurt. In my opinion, when you are afraid of getting hurt in a sport like BMX, it's time to hang up the wheels. And that's exactly what he did. In the early 90s, Bob left Haro the company, and you could start to see a design shift once Bob wasn't there. He also, I think, signed a non-compete clause until about 93, so that's why he kind of just went into hiatus. And Bob, for all intents and purposes, at this point in his life, retired at like age 33. So if you're wondering what happened to the brand Haro, then we could leave it here. Like so many other BMX companies from the 80s, the creator, the namesake of the company, was just no longer involved with the company. And Haro definitely went through some tumultuous periods. They made some junk bikes after Bob left. I would say Haro, like so many brands, like GT even, is starting to have a resurgence, or they have had. I'm not as familiar with Haro's current lineup as I am with like GTs, but they've got a well-known reputation now. They make some decent bikes now. So, what happened to Bob? He retired at age 33. I think Bob is one of the biggest success stories that I'm aware of within the world of BMX, because a lot of times they kind of get caught up with their own fame. They make really bad business decisions. They end up addicts. So many of these stories that we've talked about have ended with the person in question not doing well for themselves. But he played it perfectly. Like, he got out of the game before he got seriously injured. He's not an addict that I know of, other than he's addicted to being creative and designing things. And at 33, he got to retire, technically. And with that non-compete clause, he wasn't allowed to do anything for, I think, like 3 years within the BMX industry. And so from, I'd say, mid-90s to now, what has Bob been doing? I'll leave you some links down below because it's super interesting. He did create a Haro design firm, because that's what he's always loved to do, is design things. And he actually went out and started designing stuff for Thor, the motorcycle brand. Since he retired, he just kind of got to do what he wanted to do. He said he got bored. You can't stay retired very long, especially if you're 33 years old, or else I think you will succumb to maybe some addictions and destructive tendencies. But one of the more interesting things I think Bob has been involved with is music. He has created music, and this popped up when I was searching some interviews with him on YouTube, and if you would have played some of his music, I'd be like, this dude's got the same name as the BMX Bob Haro? That's weird. No, it's actually him. And it's not bad music. I'd say it's like dark, wavy, like 80s inspired synth music kind of stuff, but I mean, he sings in it. And anybody that can create a piece of art like that, kudos to you, because creating anything is not easy, but being able to fully produce it, write the music yourself, put it out there, mad props, big respect for Bob Haro. To me, so far, if there's somebody that the kids should look up to, Bob did it right. He didn't just chase the fame of being a BMX superstar. He knew when to get out when he was ahead, built up this company, and he's got distinct stages in his life that I would consider each one of them a success. So I appreciate you watching. Super interesting dude. Now I'm in desperate need of a haircut, so I will see everybody in the next one. Please, if you did get this far, like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification. All those things help. And definitely, I always take your guys' recommendations for the next videos. So by all means, put them down below. Anything to do with the cycling industry. Mountain bikes, road bikes, BMX, track bikes, I don't care. I love looking up the history of stuff. Alright, love you guys. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.